Hello and welcome to another Tyrrell Classic Workshop. Today we're talking about something that's slightly off beam, a little bit of a change, step change. We're moving away from the Italian exotica and the German exotica, and we're moving to this little baby, a Mark I Ford Capri, 3000 GT XLR. How about that for a mouthful? The Capri was a very, very popular car when it first came out in 1969, and Ford's slogan was the car that you always promised yourself. Underneath it was a humble Mark II Ford Cortina, but Ford dressed it up, restyled it. It was a sort of aping the Mustang from across the pond in the US, same stylist actually, to become a sort of European size, European ride and handling, so firmer, not as floaty as the American cars, and European sort of drivetrain, no big V8s, at least from the factory, and a sort of more small and compact package version of the Mustang. And it succeeded very well. The Mustang has its own chassis frame. This is a monocoque construction, so it's all just sheet metal. And as I say, it was a massive success for Ford. These are incredibly rare now. This is something of a sweet spot in the Capri range. It's the 3-litre Essex V6 engine and the GT, so it's not the 3000E, it's the more sporty version. And the XLR, I'm reliably informed by the owner, is various options packages. So you had option package X, L and R. And these included the 5-inch wide, wow, row-style wheels, which are really quite funky. They always have been, and they certainly are now. The extra chrome packages, map reading light inside the car, extra trim, all sorts of amazing things, and PVC reclining seats. Oh, please. Which were also known as leatherette, or a variety of other euphemisms for something that was aping leather. But this was quite the thing, and it developed a heady 138 brake horsepower, this V6 engine. It's a 60-degree V6, which is perfect for a 6-cylinder engine, included angle of the banks. 60 degrees it works with sort of 3 firing pulses of the crankshaft each time. But when they made a V4 brother of this, it was a pretty ghastly engine actually, because again it's 60 degrees. It's actually out of sync for a V4 engine. It should be 90 because of the throws of the crankshaft, 90, 180, 270, 360. So they had to put a balancer shaft in the engine like Porsche used on their big inline 4-cylinder in 1982. But the net result still wasn't all that wonderful, and it was a pretty lumpy engine, really, the V4. But this is lovely. It wasn't without its problems. The camshaft is gear-driven from the crank, so the crank has a steel gear. The camshaft has a fibre gear driving it, which did disintegrate over time with the heat. It was nylon, actually. Eventually, Ford modified it. They put a different, more robust gear in it. This engine I found in service when I was working on a lot of V6 Fords in the 1980s and 90s. This engine is generally more robust than its counterpart from Europe, the Cologne V6. Very similar design-wise, but the Cologne, it's a bit confusing, all this business, because you had the Taunus V4, the German V4, the Cortina and Corsair V4 in the UK, Corsair V4, and then you had the V6s, the Cologne V6 and the Essex V6. And it was all, and the German one was designed in the US. So it was really, really confusing, but both V4s ended up being really rough, and both V6s were much better because of the 60-degree angle. But I found that the Cologne engine, the oil to the cylinder head, to the valve gear, the rocker shafts, feeds up past an excessively wide gap on a cylinder head bolt, which sounds fine, but the problem is if you didn't change the oil on them super regularly and black sludge set in, as it did in a lot of 1980s engines, because the oil technology was still trying to catch up with the oil change intervals, etc., they got blocked, and that's why the top end, the tappets on the Cologne V6s, could quite easily become noisy. whereas the Essex V6 used a more conventional oil feed system to the top end. A little bit anecdotal, but hey. But this car is really it's a lovely example. The owner has got lots of other esoteric cars, some of which are really sort of would look far more at home in this workshop than this would. So he's no stranger to really nice cars, but he loves this car and he uses it. So the car isn't in concours condition. He's chosen to retain a lot of the original interior fittings, which are 50 years old, 51, 52 actually years old, and they're showing their age. And he doesn't care because he wants a car that he can use and that is as original as possible. And this car in 1969, when it was announced, particularly the 3-litre version, you say that in sort of hushed tones really, was the car to have for any young blade that was, or gadabout young lady around town. This was the car to have. It was a seriously creddish car, the Capri. But the 3-litre was the one to have. They made them in much smaller engine sizes. And yeah, this is really something quite special. And there are only 15 of them left now, the GT XLR 3-litre in the UK apparently. And they made, for the whole Capri production line, they made 1.9 million of them. So the attrition rate has been enormous. They rusted, they blew up. People scrapped them left, right and centre. In all 60s and 70s cars, you could almost hear them fizzing. They rusted so quickly, really. And these were no exception. So it's just a great car to have here. And I personally I'm passionate about cars. They don't have to be multi-million-pound supercars. That's what I spend most of my working day working on and driving, and fine, that's great. It's a lovely privilege, but I get just as much fun out of driving fairly lowly machinery as I do out of those. A car doesn't have to sort of meet the 6 or 7 figure criterion to be fun. You can have just as much fun driving something like this as you can far more expensive cars. So for me, I don't have a problem with this. I think it's a great car. It looks superb. It gets lots of attention when you're out driving it. So we're going to tune this car. It's in for a tune-up, and then we're going to give it a little run. We've taken the air filter off, got that out of the way, and what we're left with is a simple twin-choke Weber carburettor, which is what was standard equipment on these and worked very well, in fairness. But what I'm going to do first, this is a distributor where the ignition system is. I'm going to just remove this. This is the rotor arm, which distributes the spark to the different cylinders, and quite often that's designed to move like that and spring back, and it's not springing back. It's actually just not quite coming back to rest. This is called the centrifugal advance mechanism, and as the revs build on the car, you've got a bob weight type mechanism that opens with centrifugal force as the speed of the engine rises, and actually moves that round to bring the point of spark inside the engine further forward, because even though the engine's moving more quickly, the spark still sparks at the same length of time. So it has to anticipate when the power moment is. It has to anticipate when to actually ignite the mixture to get the right point. And there's a little felt pad in here which I'm going to put some oil on, which is dry. So even though somebody has modified this to electronic ignition at some point, which is great, the actual centrifugal advance mechanism is not working properly. So I'm going to do that now. Just put a bit more oil on there. Put that back on. That feels better already. Springing back. That's excellent. Oh, that's good. And over time, what will happen is that oil will actually soak, it'll run down the distributor spindle and into the bob weights at the bottom and free them off. So I'm very, very happy with that. he tells me that the ignition timing has been set, so we'll put that back into place, refit the distributor cap carefully, he says. There we go. And now I'm going to start the engine and set the idle mixtures. There are only 2 idle mixture screws on this car, one either side for each of the air intakes, each of the carburetor intakes. And what I'm listening for is simply the smoothest running possible. So I screw this screw in to lean off the mixture, to weaken the amount of petrol. And you can see the engine's immediately struggling because it's getting less petrol for a given amount of air. So I just unscrew the screw. Now it's not making any difference, which means that the mixture is about right. So we'll leave that there. Do the other side. And again, you can hear the revs drop immediately because it's too weak again. I've screwed that out again. It's not, now that's not making any difference. If I screw it out more, again the revs are dropping because it's now got far too much petrol for the amount of air going in. So I just screw that back. Again, it's going weak. That's it. And because the mixtures are now set and it's happy, it's now running too quickly. So I'm just going to back off the idle speed. Still a little bit high, that. And there we have it. Smooth as you like. We'll take that out on the road and see how it is. Well, here we are on the road in this beautiful 3-litre Capri. It's very funny, I was speaking to a customer earlier on and I told him that I was making a video about this car, and he said, "Oh, that's the best car I've ever had." And this guy has had all sorts of cars, very, very interesting cars, some of them worth a lot of money, and he still says, "No, that's the best car I've ever had." And he recalls stories. He was a bike racer, and he had the car in 1972, and he told me that he used to drive down the M1, four people in the car with a trailer with 2 racing bikes on it, regularly at 90 miles an hour. So there you go. What more can you say? But there's a sufficient time gap between then and now for it not to matter really. But of course, we live in such sanitized times now, and understandably that yeah, you wouldn't get away with that now. But this car feels so smooth. It's a little bit approximate, in terms of where you point it, but the engine's really quiet, very smooth now it's been tuned. But it does feel like a 1970 or 69 car. But I suppose that's to be expected because it is. Yeah, the more eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that the rev counter isn't working. It's a very, very early electronic rev counter, being late 60s technology, and the inductor goes inside the rev counter, so at some stage I'm sure he'll have that redone. But it's once you get used to things moving about a bit, it's quite a pleasant experience. The gear change is interesting because it's a remote control mechanism. It's not directly above the gearbox. It's not quite as precise as I was expecting it to be. We think of Ford Cortinas from this era, and the gear change is super slick on them. It's one of the nicest gear changes. But on this car, it doesn't feel, it's certainly positive, but there's quite a lot of play in the lever and the mechanism. Yeah, once you get over that initial lost motion with the steering, a motoring journalist would call it turn-in. It does actually respond quite well. But there's just a little bit of movement there. But yeah. Engine's really quiet. I can imagine this being a relaxed cruising car. The road noise is remarkably well suppressed. What a great car this must have been 50 odd years ago. No wonder they're so revered. And the trim levels apparently are L, XL and XLR. So you had the three trim levels before the Capri E came out, the 2000 or 3000E. And with the XLR, you got the whole gamut. You got the center console, the 6 instrument pack, which we have here. The center console with the clock, of course, being the 7th instrument. So we got oil pressure, temperature, water temperature, ammeter, fuel gauge, yeah, it's going very well. Just ambling along here, not really pushing the car, just waiting for everything to warm up. Apparently Ford were originally going to call it the Colt, but obviously as the Junior Mustang, but they couldn't because Mitsubishi had already registered the name, so that's why it ended up being called the Capri. And of course the Cortina, they're talking about exotic Italian locations. The Cortina is a ski resort in Italy, Cortina d'Ampezzo, which was made famous by the James Bond film For Your Eyes Only, where some of it was set at the ski jump and in the town centre. I'm getting used to that gear change now. You have to be deliberate with it, but it does work. It's quite positive and quite slick. Just takes a little bit of getting used to. Instruments are behaving themselves well, apart from the rev counter, which doesn't seem to want to work at all. I sort of get why this car was so cool in period. It's a very agreeable shape, and also it's a 2+2. I mean, you can fit 2 adults in the back, no problem. Very comfortable place for driver and passenger, of course, with the reclining seats, which I suspect may have been in sort of part of the XLR package. I can't imagine the base Capri having reclining seats, but I might be wrong. This was a big deal in 1969. warmed up. It's now time to open it up and feel a bit of that 3-litre V6 magic. Oh, great. It's, in spite of the fact the top speed is 115 miles an hour or thereabouts, it really does pick up and go, this car. No wonder it felt fast at the time. I mean, in 1969, any car that did comfortably over 100 miles an hour was properly quick. But this still feels quick to this day. It really does. It's bags of fun. Bags of fun. Just try that again. Oh. Great. I have to confess, this car is winning me over. I thought it would from what other people have said, but we'll just try it through this bend. Oh, great. It goes back to my earlier point. You don't have to have a car that's worth gazillions of pounds or with amazing on-paper performance to have fun. Driving something like this is bags of fun. And surely that's what classic car ownership is about at the end of the day. It's smiles per mile. It's how much sort of value for money you get out of it. And that's not all down to facts and figures. It's about the fun factor. And this car has it in spadefuls. Woo! Great. I don't want to give this car back. Well, I'm very happy with the way the engine's tuned as well. It's tuned in really beautifully. It's pulling really strongly. Timing is obviously right. Yeah, reluctantly, I'm going to have to give this car back to the owner and say, go and have some fun with that. Well, there we are. Something a little bit different, but nonetheless interesting in a way. So thanks for watching. Please like, please subscribe, please share. It's the lifeblood of the channel, and we'll be back with something else very soon.